disruptions along various dimensions. You could think in terms of economics, in terms of AI takeover of the jobs.
Talk about present times in 2026. What do you think is the relevance of this book and the gravitas? And do you really think that it has any meaning, any purpose, or people are going to appreciate the values of PCR?
They are able to assess the situation in a very objective way. They are not misled by the media. They are not misled by people's opinions. They are not misled by their leaders whom they had placed faith on them. But they are able to take objective decisions by themselves.
Hi, friends. I welcome you on the 55th episode of Unfiltered Conversation. We started this series with the objective of talking to the people who are doing something unique and special in their part of life and to understand their perspective and how we can learn something from that. In present times, when we see, then we find that people are trying to overpower other. They speak much more louder. They try to tell people that how they are good than others. Maybe sometimes we have seen many politicians or maybe the businessmen or the CXOs with their oratory skill, with their power, they try to tell that yes, they are the real person and we have to listen to them. But then over a time, we have also realized that all those things are temporary in nature. But there are certain things which are constant and they are for ages and ages and they are going to be there in coming times too. So, what is that thing which is still continuing in spite of so many things happening around us? So, today to talk a little bit more about that and to understand about that, we have a very special guest. He is Dr. Padmanabhan. Very recently, he has co-authored a book with Dr. Ankoor Dasguupta, and the name of the book is The Gravitas Blueprint. You can see here. Now, apart from that, he's working as a data product leader in a prestigious financial company, having more than 24 years of experience. But apart from his technical field where he's working, he has more interest with respect to human evolution, with respect to mythology, and that's why this book has come. So let's try to understand from him that what exactly was the objective of this book, what he's trying to communicate through this book, and first of all to understand that what exactly is the meaning of this word gravitas. Welcome, Satish. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Bhavya. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. I'm doing really great. Thanks for this opportunity.
So, Satish, this word gravitas, it is being used a lot of time and people have a different understanding and a perspective about that. But what is your understanding? What is your interpretation about this particular word gravitas?
Yeah. So, gravitas, as it's normally understood, is dignity, respect, solemnity, the weight of authority, as people would say. Its origins come from the Roman times. It was deemed as one of the three fundamental qualities of leadership, especially of the members of the Senate, etc. Right? And over a period of time, quite a number of books related to gravitas has been written. Gravitas and executive presence are used together, almost synonymously. A number of leadership literature is found with respect to what executive presence is, how the executive presence can be cultivated, how it can be demonstrated, what kind of an impact it has, etc. But gravitas, as you see, with all this mentions, my view is that it has lost its core message. It has lost its essence.
Mhm.
So my book is an endeavor to understand what gravitas at its essence means. Stripping away the necessity for legacy, stripping away the pedigree, stripping away all the need for accomplishments, right? Can gravitas be imbibed by normal individuals, by professionals? And what kind of an impact and effect it has on others who are near by them? So this book is an endeavor towards that end. So in my view, gravitas requires three interlocking dynamics, what we call as PCR, presence, coherence, and resonance. Let me briefly touch upon what PCR means here.
Yeah.
Presence means being present, being in the now, as many of these traditions would actually call it. Being
Mhm.
attentive, being alert, being awake, even. even going to some of the philosophical references to that. It is to actually be in your skin at any point in time and to maximize your field of cognition as much as possible without losing your center.
Mhm.
Coherence is about being aligned to your values, your purpose without deviations there, being consistent.
Mhm.
In a sense, coherence could be understood as dynamic stillness or dynamic presence. In spite of being immersed or engaged in your actions, you're not losing your sense of balance there. You're fully focused on what you're supposed to do, and
Mhm.
you're not necessarily bothered about the outcomes or the results. You allow it to happen.
Yeah.
And resonance is about being fully objectively connected to the world and the reality. That is, in essence, if you combine all of these three, it is about finding your footing in this world. It is being fully connected, is being fully connected to yourself, being fully coherent in whatever you do, and being fully connected to the reality that is in front of you. And when you create, that is how you create resonance. You create the circumstances through which you would allow the outcomes to align with what you have set out for.
Mhm.
So in an interpersonal situation between two or more individuals, gravitas, in its essence, manifests at a neurobiological level. It
Mhm. Mhm.
starts with a neurobiological grounding or stillness, and because of the low prediction error that others are able to perceive, right? There is an instinctive perception that this person can be trusted. He is coming from an authentic space. He or she is coming from an authentic space. This is the kind
Mhm.
of perception that is created in others also. Thereby, this kind of clarity and authenticity becomes transmitted to others as well. Right. So this is what gravitas in its essence is, stripping away from the legacy, the titles, the pedigree, and all of the things. And in
Mhm.
a sense, it democratizes the meaning of the word of gravitas, and it becomes a quality that anybody and everybody has to essentially imbibe.
So I'll come back to PCR later on this acronym, but before that, when we talk about gravitas, and if I see through your book, you're talking a lot with respect to leadership. And when we talk about leadership, it can be a political leadership for a particular country. It can be about a particular company where there's a person in the top. It can be head of a family, or it can be someone else. So, from which perspective, means when you talk about gravitas, you're talking of, is it with respect to individual, or is it with respect to someone who is holding a position?
Yeah. So, as I've mentioned before, uh, when we go into the very essence of what gravitas is, it also frees the meaning of gravitas as to broadly applicable to all kind of individuals,
Mhm.
not just leaders. But if you take the situation of leaders, gravitas essentially means that they are able to create that the right kind of nurturing environment. What we call it is system stewardship. They are able to create that right kind of environment where the conditions are so harmonious and stable enough to lead to the desirous outcomes. So it can be any kind of leadership. It can be political leadership. It can be an enterprise leadership, organization leadership. It can be leadership of NGOs, any kind of organization. It can be even situational leadership, right? And and leadership is not confined to the people who are of the decision-making authority. Leadership is how you lead in the in the specific situations.
Mhm.
And a gravitas focused leadership specifically allows for the manifestation of all possible outcomes
Mhm.
which would help in reaching the desired goal. It doesn't restrict, but it allows, it creates that space for others also. And thereby, you are also focused on creating the right kind of conditions, the environmental conditions, so that the results become more of a natural byproduct rather than
Mhm.
forcing the results through a directive approach.
So, can you quote any example, maybe of present time or maybe earlier times, whom you think, maybe a person who has set an example of PCR, whom you
Yes.
admire or you may think?
See, A lot of examples are there. I can take the examples of Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, etc. So Mahatma Gandhi stood for truth and nonviolence, as is normally known. Right? So in essence, he tried to maintain that ethical holding all throughout his life. He tried to ensure there is a complete congruence as what is there within is what is outside also.
Mhm.
What he says he tries to do, and what he did, he definitely quotes that is what is being done. Not trying to do the shorter ways out. Right?
Mhm.
And it comes from a deep space of authenticity also. It is his experiences that has led him to the to his understanding that this movement is necessary to drive the British away from India so that people could be set free. And you could see that there is a high level of congruence in his actions, high level of congruence with his actions and his words and his values.
Mhm.
And this has created resonance in masses. People are able to notice that he comes from that authentic state and they are actually following him. It is not
Mhm.
necessarily the case that Gandhi is the most intelligent. It is not necessarily the case that Gandhi was the most wise. It was not necessarily the case that he made the perfect decisions at all times. But people believed in him, trusted in him, followed him. Many examples are there, like the Quit India movement, the Dandi March. Many examples we could actually quote. But then he instilled something, the sense of self pride as well as self esteem, and the necessity of believing in what he said. That people need to be free in what they do. So when he was able to stand for the right cause, it resonated with the masses, and he was able to get people, not able to influence them in a direct sense, but he was able to allow them to connect with what he wanted to say, going past what he actually said. Even like people were able to connect to the man. If Gandhi
Mhm.
was wearing a coat, he was very, uh, he was appearing in a very polished and a professional way. I don't
Yeah.
think people would be able to follow him, because that is not the real situation of the people of India at those times.
Yeah.
He wanted to immerse into their conditions. He wanted to feel their pain. He wanted to really understand what they are going through. And hence, he wore a simple dhoti with a walking stick, etc. And this was symbolic, highly symbolic of what common man was at that time. And therefore, this is a classic example of presence, coherence, and resonance. And I would believe that Nelson Mandela also did quite a number of things, in a similar way. But that doesn't mean gravitas cannot be manifested in professional environments
Mhm.
where the focus is on attaining business goals,
Yeah.
um, paying back to the investors who have funded you. In those situations, the focus on gravitas could be a little more narrow, but then you create the right kind of environment and a nurturing situation where people are able to totally empathize with the goals that have been set by the business. Values such as total transparency, holding on to ethics, and allowing people to see the big picture.
Mhm.
People are
Mhm.
not just to focus on what they are able to do, but they are able to see the big picture in every little thing that they do. Right? Their work is not about creating those Excel sheets or building those programs. Their work is about creating value to the end customers, and their work is about creating a positive impact on people's lives. If they're able to connect the dots,
Yeah.
and the organization is able to nurture those conditions where people are becoming more and more cognizant of that, then the sense of belongingness of the employees will also increase, and they would be able to give their best. So these are examples of creating the right kind of environments, being totally transparent, ethical, etc., so that people are able to bring out the best versions in themselves and contribute towards a larger cause.
Now, when we talk about present times in 2026, what do you think is the relevance of this book and the gravitas? And do you really think that it has any meaning, any purpose, or people are going to appreciate the values of PCR?
Yes, I think it is highly relevant to the current times. So we are in a polycrisis situation of large scale disruptions along various dimensions. You could think in terms of economics, in terms of AI takeover of the jobs, in terms of geopolitical situations that we have, the contention for energy and resources as what we see. We
Yeah.
are believing and trusting the leaders, but we see that wrong decisions are being taken, lives are being lost, and people are not exactly following what they say. You can take the examples of US, Iran war also, but I don't want to specifically quote the individuals who are responsible for that, but you could see that as a live example. As what we actually see is that people are not standing for what they say, and people are not saying what they actually did. Right? There is a loss of transparency and as well as an alignment towards their fundamental values.
Yeah.
And the focus is more about creating the kind of influence that would bring more people to believe in your cause, whether it is for the good or for the bad, rather than being completely transparent and taking everybody along towards a shared goal that will be of benefit to all. So, in this kind of a polycrisis situation, the alignment of the inner versus the outer, ensuring that you are able to cultivate that congruence becomes extremely important. Right? It becomes extremely important not just for the leaders, but it becomes extremely important for every individual so that they are able to assess the situation in a very objective way. They are not misled by the media. They are not misled by people's opinions. They are not misled by their leaders whom they had placed faith on them. But they are able to take objective decisions by themselves. Now, if they have to start trusting themselves, they will have to ensure that they are able to bring in that kind of a congruence and alignment within and create that uh, sense of strong self-conviction before whatever they do. So the transition from identity to integrity is one of the principles that has been outlined in my book, becomes very, very important to create the foundations on which gravitas based functioning can be cultivated. Not just leadership, but gravitas based functioning can be cultivated. And even if you take it further, it creates a positive ripple effect into the society at an interpersonal level and possibly at a communal and social level also. And the book explores the deeper substratum of influence between individuals at a neurobiological level as well. So the coherence that an individual carries within them, while they try to ensure that congruence is there, does reflect in their neurobiological stability, and that can be perceived by individuals who are at their close proximity, going past the visual and auditory cues. This stability becomes transmissive. It mirrors onto individuals who are there, and those individuals are able to rediscover their own spaces, their own clarity. They're able to connect and resonate, going well beyond the words that have been communicated. You could see this example in the case of Gandhi, the case of Vivekanand, and in any case of some of the greatest leaders that we have. So what really differentiates the greatest leaders from the good leaders is this quality, the fundamental quality of gravitas in its true meaning, in its true essence. Right? Going past what they can actually do into the realms of what is unsaid.
No, I think it is not only today, but I think time immemorial, it was happening like this, that whenever we are thinking about that you should have coherence, you should be mindful, you should be resonant, then when we are speaking these words, they look very good. But when it comes into practice, then you start realizing that it is very difficult to imbibe them, first of all. And then, even if you are imbibing, you are generally considered to be weak. You are considered that you don't have that fire. It is being assumed that you don't have the purpose in life, and you do not have that killer instinct in you. What is your opinion about this?
Yes, so these are not new principles. They were always there in our traditions. It was always part of the wisdom literature of all societies, of all cultures. Um, but then the difference there is that the pace of change was much slower. These were something that was definitely good to have, and something that needs to be cultivated over time, over the span of your life. It becomes necessary. You slowly start to discover the necessity for it, and there was time that was available for you to do it. Now the situation is more imminent now, with the pace of disruption much higher. The levels of anxiety is also much higher, and therefore you need to identify ways and means by which you can quickly anchor yourself while being immersed in this volatile environment in a very dynamic way. And therefore, the focus has to shift towards how can this stillness and stabilization permeate into your natural functioning state. It is easy to be still, as you said. It is easy to be still. It is easy to be calm at times of less stress. Maybe when you
Yeah.
wake up in the morning during 3 hours of the day, it is easy to do these practices. What happens during the rest of the day? It's a maelstrom. You are actually swept away by a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts. You are put into
Yeah.
high pressure and stress situations. So how do we do that? So it's a question of you build the right kind of psychological foundations at its essence, right? So this is what a dynamic equilibrium is about. A dynamic equilibrium is able to maintain its balance because it is able to function within a certain boundary. So you need to create that boundary for yourself. What could be an example of that boundary? Say, for example, you have a set of goals and target for the day to be completed.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you may or may not have completed, but you take a stock of what you have actually done, right? And then you try to recalibrate from there. Maybe the task that you had set out was very ambitious. It could be quite difficult. Maybe you don't have the skills to do it also, or maybe the circumstances were not right. There are things that is definitely outside of your control. But you take a
Yeah.
stock of the situation, you build that awareness. You build that awareness. So you would start to recalibrate the next day on the goals that you set. You start to become more and more responsible for yourself. So you start to get into a situation where you become more responsible. You're actually able to align yourself as between your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. That alignment becomes more and more solidified. And this becomes the foundation on which you would be able to permeate that stillness and the stability in whatever you do. And the second thing that I would say is that at times of less stress, it is important that you are active in terms of cultivating those practices that would allow you to remain still and calm. Like it could be yogic practices, it could be meditation, it could be any of Buddhist practices. There are practices that are there in many other traditions also to maintain that
Yeah.
alertness and stillness. So that action during inaction becomes important, right? So that you get into that kind of a flow or a zen state, you are able to create that inaction in action. So when you're in an action, when you're completely immersed and engaged in your activities on a day-to-day life, you're getting into that kind of a flow state because of the work that you have done before. You are reaping the benefits of the cultivation that you have done before in
Yeah.
terms of the practices that you have done. So in that way, so two things. One is you're able to create a boundary and a parameter for yourself so that you're able to have that dynamic equilibrium within, nothing spills out. And secondly, it is important that you are able to cultivate continuously so that that residual state of that cultivation is able to permeate in whatever you do. And thereby, people would start to notice. There has been research done where uh, when photographs of deep state meditators over several years were provided to individuals, there
Yeah.
was no indication of whether they had done meditation or not. People were able to instinctively realize that who had done meditation, who practices these things versus the ones who are not. So there is something that is fundamentally there about a person's appearance in terms of micromuscular tensions, in terms of the expressions at a very minute level, in terms of the alignment, right? There is no fidgety, there is no tension on the jaw, etc. Where my book details, there is something that is there that the brains are able to recognize, and it is able to say that this person is practicing these and perhaps can be trusted more for engagements than the rest, right? So that is the resonance effect that I am talking about. So it is a matter of cultivation. It is a matter of setting boundaries to yours. Recently, I watched the film Odyssey, and there was one particular scene when they pass through an island. There is an island of sirens. So these sirens are mystical women who are half woman, half bird, and they sing a very alluring song. This alluring song makes people delirious, and that it makes them almost like as if they are drugged into a drugged state, and they immediately swim into the waters. They drown themselves in an attempt to reach the sirens. And it so happens that Odysseus is aware of this because he has been prophesied that these are the situations that he will be facing. So he had asked his men to actually tie himself onto a mast with a rope. and gave clear instructions that he should never be untied regardless of whatever he says in that state. So he was also subject to the same situation. He also wanted to break free out of the ropes, right, in the presence of those sirens. But the men, knowing their his orders, did not do so. And in fact, unfortunately, many of them lost their lives being infatuated by the songs that were sung by the sirens. What this actually says is about self-discipline. You know your limitations, you know where you can actually fail, right? But yet you create those boundaries for yourself so that you ensure that your failure is limited and you're still able to stay course and stay focused on what you're supposed to do.
I think wonderful example given about this movie Odyssey. But again, I'll come back to the same concept that when you're talking about presence, coherence, and resonance, if you look around, maybe the global leaders, maybe the political leaders in India, or maybe other countries, maybe wherever we are working, or maybe at home, people are trying to show their presence with their power. People are trying to bulldoze and try to show that how powerful they are, and that is the way in which they are trying to show their leadership skills at whatever level they are. And on the other side, when we talk in context of this particular book, it is talking about entirely a different thing. How much easy or difficult it is to imbibe all these things, which, as you rightly said, that which are there in our civilization long back, but then somewhere we are forgetting it, or maybe somewhere we are not realizing the importance of it.
Yes. So just a small correction, right? You cannot show presence with your power. It means that you have lost the sense of self-awareness in the moment that you try to control the situation, the moment that you try to influence and control others, overpower others. You are actually discounting your experience then. Because you are discounting your experience, you want to shape it in a manner that will be favorable to yourself. And therefore, presence and power doesn't go together. So this is a very important understanding. In its deepest essence, means that you'll have to choose between power and presence at some point. If you really want to imbibe that presence, you should be willing to relinquish control. You should be willing to allow things to happen. So it is a matter of understanding. And this understanding was always there through the ages. And you're right, it becomes more difficult. But it becomes more difficult. What is the recourse? So if you are in a prison, the only recourse is to need to escape from that prison, right? You cannot stay in the prison. You might be getting some good food. You might be able to be free within that prison. You might be able to discuss with your inmates. But then that is still a prison. So when you're in a prison, the natural thing is to move outside of that. So we are in a situation now that it is not something that is good to have, but it's a kind of a must have. You are in that critical situation. You don't have anywhere else to run. Right? We are actually talking about people losing their lives. We're talking about people losing their jobs. We are talking about a situation with dealing with a technology which could be more intelligent than us. We really don't know what it will do with us. Right? So what really matters, what is really mattering to the human survival is something that people really need to be pondering about. And it is definitely not easy, but it becomes easy under the right conditions. It becomes easy when people together realize the value of it. And there are groups, there are spiritual groups, they do it together, they meditate together, they do yoga together, they chant together in an effort so that they are able to keep each other awake. Right? If I have to take an analogy, if there are 20 people, and at 20 people cannot be awake at the same time, one of them might fall asleep, but because others are awake, they can wake each other up. But if you have to do it all by yourself, if you fall asleep, you even don't know whether you're asleep or not. So it requires a kind of a joint effort, and that is where the transmissive effect of gravitas becomes very, very important. That's why it's not just confined to presence. It's about presence, coherence, and resonance. So resonance is happening at a neurobiological level is what the book states. And this has been underpinned by quite a number of theories. As you could see in the book, I don't want to go into the details of that, but it happens at that level. It happens at that level, but it has to be substantiated and fortified through your actions, the right kind of leadership, which allows and creates a space for others. And which is what about system stewardship is all about. right? So the answer to your question is we don't have a way out, but there is a way out in the sense that you can do it much better in a communal way, right? We create societies and communities which help people to practice these things.
Mhm.
One of my intentions of my book is to create a community where we could practice these on a day-to-day basis. It starts with very small things. I did mentioning about the journaling, but it could also be in the manner that you speak. You introduce those deliberate pauses when you speak, right? uh, you ensure that you are having the right kind of breathing even before you start a conversation. These are very small things, minor adjustments. Some of those adjustments could be at a somatic level also, right?
Mhm.
So these are some minor adjustments. It doesn't take much of our effort and energy, but over a period of time it creates the benefits. It creates the benefits for yourself, and as well as it creates the benefits for us. One of the radical takeaways of this book, and perhaps a mind-blowing outcome of close to 14 to 15 months of research, is that you can contribute to the world around you, not just through the actions, not just through certain desired outcomes, but by maintaining that inner stability alone, by being congruent to your values, being aligned to your purpose, right? Being true to who you are, and being coherent under pressure. You are actually contributing to into the world in ways that you cannot even fathom. It's because whoever you meet, the systems that you touch, you are transmitting that coherence. You are reducing the stress and the tension for others. You are making the systems more predictable. You are making the systems more transparent, and that creates a space for others to flourish also. And therefore, the leadership of today and tomorrow goes even past the need for influence. Earlier it was about authority, then control, influence. Now it goes from influence to stabilization. Because every node has its own cognitive space. And it
Yeah.
is about the stabilization, create the right kind of stabilizing conditions. The leader of today and tomorrow is about one who can create peace, not the one who can influence. Gone are the days of the unipolar world, even at a geopolitical scenario. So the power is getting distributed. And even the emerging powers, the great powers like Russia and China, they don't want to take everything for themselves. They are trying to use their soft power. They are trying to stand for values, for principles. And they know that when they stand for that, it is easy for them to get the right kind of support.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think you summarized it very rightly that the leaders of tomorrow are not with respect to the influence. It is more about how you can make your presence felt. Dr. Satish, I think it has been an excellent discussion with you, wherein we talked in detail about what exactly this Gravitas is all about, what exactly is this PCR, about presence, congruence, as well as with respect to the resonance, and then what are the challenges that the society is facing, and why it is more important, even more important in present times, wherein we are always thinking about the power and the position and how to influence the other. But actually, the real thing which can go a long way, which is a part of our civilization, is that how we can, with our inner stillness, how with our inner stability, we can create the power outside. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bhavya. Thanks for this opportunity. It was a wonderful discussion. Thank you.